Welcome everybody to another edition of Motor City Metrics, the podcast covering the Detroit Tigers and all things baseball. We're here tonight after watching the mastery of Shohei Ohtani take over the Motor City today, and we're going to be talking about that and a whole host of other things with the baseball trade deadline approaching. The Tigers possibly putting to bed any talk of contending. So we'll be talking about all of that and much more tonight. I'm sure we'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll cover all the emotions possible in baseball. My name's John Urkala. People call me Yoop because I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Very proud Yooper native. Joining me is the guy I call JFK. His name is John effing Kloss. He knows all things Detroit Piston, Detroit Tigers. He'll be talking with us as well tonight. Our grand leaders maybe joining in at some point, Mr. Chris Brown and Rogelio Castillo. They are in the great state of, actually the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, watching the Erie Seawolves tonight. John, what do you know?
Dude, you need to be doing the intro every single time. That was incredible, man. Did you practice that or did you write it down?
I practiced nothing.
That was really good. Not a good series for the Tigers. I thought about going to the game today. I'm kind of glad that I didn't. It was pretty bad. Not a lot of positives to take away. I mean, Lorenzen had a decent start. Matt Manning got knocked around a little bit. I'm excited for the trade deadline. I think this will be our last show before the trade deadline. We're probably going to do like a trade deadline special. Mm-hmm. So that'll be pretty fun. So just kind of giving our predictions on what's going to happen, our reactions on some of the trades that have already gone down, and just talking about the Tigers, what they could potentially do as well. What do you want to start it off with? It
was interesting. You say you almost went down there today, and the Tigers laid an egg. Let's face it, they didn't play great, but it would have been for the folks who were there. They did get to see the brilliance of Shohei Ohtani. I mean, they saw him pitch a one-hit shutout, his first complete game. Then in the nightcap, he comes out and he just hits a couple of home runs just for kicks, right? He did leave with a little bit of an injury. Hopefully it's just a cramp in his back and it wasn't an oblique. That would be a bummer if that happened. But if you were in the stadium today, you got to see a guy who may go down as one of the 5 greatest baseball players of all time when it's all said and done. I exchanged a couple of Facebook messages with a lady who I used to coach in high school basketball way back in the 90s, John. That's another century. I don't think you were alive at this time when it happened, but I coached high school basketball, and she had her family at the game, and they were wearing their Tiger gear, but she mentioned in her note, the kids will always say they saw Shohei Ohtani pitch a shutout and hit 2 home runs. Shutout, one hitter, and hit 2 home runs. So she was pretty excited to be there. So were her kids, even though the Tigers had a rough day. The series itself was, obviously had a rain out, so there was a little bit of a delay. Today was just a dreadful day from start to finish. There wasn't a whole lot of good to talk about. The game, of course, on Tuesday night is the one that really hurts. I mean, they made the big rally. They had the winning run in scoring position. They could not come up with a run in the 10th to extend the game. It was really unfortunate because they made a spirited comeback late, got a couple breaks, but then in the end they couldn't capitalize. Mickey Moniak missed the ball in center field, but then he kind of came through with a double off Alex Lang in the 10th inning. That was kind of almost like that one. If that game goes the other way to the Tigers, you almost wonder if they come out with a little bit more of a spirit today. It really just was really a downer of a night.
Yeah. The game one was a little bit rough. It was cool to see a comeback, and you thought they could pull it out in the end. I think what was most unfortunate is just the starters struggling. Lorenzen didn't have a necessarily bad start, gave up 3 runs in 5 innings. Like I said, Matt Manning giving up 7 runs. And Eduardo Rodriguez didn't have the greatest start as well. But, I mean, this very well might be the last starts we see from Erod and Lorenzen. Lorenzen finishes I say finishes. We're predicting this will be his last start. So with a 3.58 ERA, has pitched over 100 innings, has led the Tigers in innings pitched. Just for Michael Lorenzen, I think he was a fantastic pickup. He's really been a veteran presence in that rotation. That's been much needed with all the injuries that they've had. I feel like he's been the one constant for the Detroit Tigers in that rotation. He did miss the beginning of the season, but since then he's just been rock solid for him. I would say probably having the best season of his career. So a tip of the cap to Michael Lorenzen for what he's been able to do for this team. And a great signing by Scott Harris. But yeah, not much to talk about offensively. Spencer Torkelson continues to do his thing. Riley Green has picked up right where he left off. I was looking at some numbers from him. He was hitting around like 360 or 370 since he returned. That's really great to see. Kerry Carpenter slowed down a little bit over these last couple games. And then Jake Rogers, I think, deserves to be talked about as well. He's been really, really solid. That batting average continues to creep up there. His OPS is around 750, which for a catcher is very, very good. I mean, we know a WRC plus of 100 is league average. He's above that right now. So really, really good to see from him. But to me, as much as we love to talk about the Tigers, as a Tigers podcast, I think the Angels are a really interesting topic. I think they're the talk of baseball right now, with obviously them deciding to trade not Shohei Ohtani. I felt like I just got my words jumbled a little bit there, but
not trade. Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. They decided not to trade Shohei Ohtani, and then they swing a trade for Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez, who has been a solid reliever for them. That's actually the second time Lopez and Giolito have been traded together. They get the Angels number 2 and number 3 prospects according to MLB Pipeline. They get a catcher, Edgar Quero, I believe that's how you say it, and then Kai Bush. These were guys I've checked in on now and then just because I thought the Tigers and Angels could be potential trade partners. I just want to get your thoughts on what the Angels are doing. I think there's obviously a ton of pressure on them now with the 2 wins today. They're 5 games over 500, a couple games out of the wild card. What do you think of the Angels going for it? And potentially they might try to keep Ohtani in the offseason as well.
I have to believe they will. I mean, it would make every sense in the world for Artie Moreno to make a full court press to keep Ohtani. Whether that's possible for them or not, I'm sure the Yankees will get involved whether they say so or not. I really think the dark horse is the Seattle Mariners. Evidently, Ohtani has spent a couple off seasons in Seattle, really likes it. I don't know if that would influence him wanting to play there. I'm sure at the end money will talk. But, I think the Angels will do their level best. Now, the trade they made, they took on 2 players who are rentals. They're both free agents at the end of the year. They paid a pretty fair price for it. I mean, people can say, well, the Angel system's not that great, so the second and third prospect in that system would only be the 8th and 9th prospect in the Rays system. And that's probably all true. But at the same time, to get 2, quality prospects, people expect them to at least have major league careers, and Quero might actually be very good. Not a bad move for the White Sox, I think. It came pretty good for them, but it is quite a price to pay for the Angels. They need Lucas Giolito to come in and be the good Lucas Giolito. We've seen a little bit of both. As Tiger fans, we've seen certainly our fair share of him over the last several years. He's had some years where he's been close to dominant. You would say that he was an excellent starter. He's also had some stretches in his career where he's had a 5.5 ERA and looked lost. And it never seems like there's any rhyme or reason when that guy appears and disappears. So you're taking a real roll of the dice that he's going to come in there and take a dozen starts for you and make a difference to push toward the playoffs. And of course, Lopez, he's a quality reliever. He has some outings where he can face 4 or 5 batters and strike out 3 of them and look really solid. So he's another of the, one of those failed starters who became a quality relief option. And obviously this time of year, teams need bullpen. So the big question to me is, are the Angels done? Are they going to go out and do something else? And then, of course, it also comes down to when can they get Mike Trout back, and how long will it take him to get back to being Mike Trout?
Yeah, I saw a rumor last night of Jeimer Candelario being linked to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could use a bat. I mean, Candelario can DH a little bit. He can play first base. They did acquire Mike Moustakas, but I could see Candelario being fit. I think they need a bat because I look at their rotation. You have Ohtani, you have Giolito, you have Patrick Sandoval. They have a solid rotation now. I don't necessarily see them adding another starter, but it's very interesting to see them. They were essentially at 500 when the trade happened. Now the sweep against the Tigers does does boost them up a little bit, but they still got a couple teams in front of them in terms of the wild card chase. And they are only 6 games back out of the division too, which, I mean, that's very attainable. But Texas and Houston, I think those are going to be 2 very good teams that are going to play well down the stretch. I think Houston is getting healthy and they're going to make some moves. But yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to follow. And if you're looking essentially, I mean, Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez, that's basically what the Tigers could potentially offer when you look at Eduardo Rodriguez and you package Erod with a reliever. Now, not the same as like Jason Foley or Alex Lange, because those guys aren't rental. But if you were to package Erod with, let's say, a Jose Cisnero or a Chasen Shreve, it's very interesting to me that you got the catcher, Edgar Quaro, and who looks like he could be a starting catcher maybe one day in the major leagues. And Kai Bush, who is a young 23-year-old left-handed pitcher, has struggled a little bit, but maybe could be, fit into a rotation someday. That's looking like what the Tigers could potentially get in an Eduardo Rodriguez trade. So it was very interesting to see, and I think it'll be exciting to see. We do have a segment talking about Tigers trade predictions and what we think is going to happen. But
I think just a fun note for me, personal note, was the year he was drafted. I'm pretty sure when we did one of those little segments on the show about just guessing who the Tigers will pick, or this might have been when we were writing for Motor City Bengals. I predicted Kai Bush to the Tigers. I'd been reading about him. Now, I know nothing about Kai Bush other than I had read his draft preview and said, hey, that might be a guy for the Tigers. I think I predicted him for like the 5th round or something like that. So, and he went 4th round to the Angels. So, anyway, it's an interesting trade, and it does, as you mentioned, really make you think about what the market will look like over the next few days for Lorenzen and Rodriguez. I'll be honest, back, let's say in May, even when Erod was at his best this year, I was still thinking, what are teams really going to pay for a rental? And now it really looks like that you can get at least one, I'm not going to say premium, but quality plus, let's call it quality plus prospect. Somebody that you can plug into your system and expect to be in the big leagues in a couple of years and be someone who can contribute. That would be a big win when you figure what they paid for Michael Lorenzen in the offseason. To bring him in, get a really nice season from him. Yes, he was quote unquote an all-star too, but he was really more just a reliable force. And the fact that he has that bullpen time in his background to give some versatility to the team that gets him, I will not be stunned if they get a player, of let's say on the level of Edgar Quero. That would not be shocking now. Where a couple months ago, I never would have guessed that. I would have guessed somebody from the second 10, 11 through 20 of some team's prospect list.
Yeah, and we will give our predictions probably at the end of the show. I think that's a good way to kind of close it out. I'd like to hear your guys' predictions in the comments and as well. But you brought up a fun segment. I think we could get to that about. So it was most surprised if they do get traded and most surprised if they don't get traded. So we decided we were going to do one for the major leagues and then one for the Tigers. So we're each going to have 2 different answers. So Uper, since this came out of your the genius of Uper,
yes.
We can start with you. Most surprised if they do get traded. You can start with MLB or Tigers, whatever, but
I was very, it's really interesting to hear the word bubbling out of San Diego that it's very possible that 2 exceptionally premium players like Josh Hader and Juan Soto could potentially get moved. The Padres, they came in here to Detroit last week and they looked pretty good. They put a beat down on the Tigers one night. They have so much talent on that team, whether there's internal strife in the clubhouse or there's just something keeping that team from gelling. It's really stunning because the name value on the backs of the uniforms really tell you, man, this should be a budding powerhouse. And it's just not happening again. So to see them now, put a sale sign on two of the really, top 5 guys on their roster talent-wise. Pretty stunning. And that would be a real jolt to some pennant races if you stick Josh Hader in somebody's bullpen. Say the Dodgers. I'm sure they wouldn't send him to the Dodgers. Forget I said that. But let's say you put him in Tampa's bullpen. Now, how long is that bullpen there, or Baltimore's? That'd be pretty amazing. All of a sudden, now that young team has that stud at the back of their bullpen. That'd be pretty good. Juan Soto, same thing. I mean, obviously, you're putting a massive on-base presence with some power into any contender's lineup. That changes the look of a lot of things in baseball.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Juan Soto was my pick. I mean,
oh, was it? I'm sorry.
No, I mean that's the one that when you see the rumor, like, no, that can't be right. But no, I mean they have Tatis locked up, they have Machado locked up, they have Bogarts locked up. I mean, maybe you don't get equal value for a player like that. You just don't. You're just getting bits and pieces and prospects that you hope can be, make up the sum. But I just don't think when you're trading a star like that, you're not getting equal value in return. So I just can't see them making a trade like that. The other player I wanted to talk about was Cody Bellinger, because the Cubs have actually been playing pretty good baseball. They're only one game above under 500 right now, and it looks like they're going to win again tonight to get to 500. And I mean, that division I think is winnable with the Reds, who have played a little bit over their head. The Brewers, I think there's a lot of questions about their offense. So I think the Cubs, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think Marcus Stroman probably gets traded, but who knows? I mean, if they're sitting there at the deadline and they're a couple games above 500, maybe they can talk themselves into, seeing what they got and try to contend for the division. I mean, Cody Bellinger's still young, and maybe he's a guy the Cubs want to look to extend and build around. So it'll be really interesting to see if they trade him. But who is your pick for the Tigers in terms of most surprised if they do get traded?
It's really down to two guys for me. One, only because he's very effective and he's under control for a long time, and that's Jason Foley. I'll still be surprised if he gets moved. I still think that they probably should look to move him, though. Relievers are very volatile. We all know that. I'm not breaking any new ground by making that statement. So he's really looking impressive. He looks like a guy who could help a quality ball club at the end of their games. At the end of, you could give him the ball in the 7th inning of a playoff game and feel like his stuff could carry the day through that inning and help you win. I really do believe that. What can that bring in trade? Again, if they got someone like a Justin Henry Malloy or something even slightly better than that in a trade for a reliever, I think that's a pretty solid piece to bring into your organization for where this team is right now. The other one who would mildly surprise me, only because everybody needs catching. People say everybody needs bullpen. Lots of teams need catchers. If Jake Rogers had to be tossed into a trade to make the right thing, to make it go, he's been hitting pretty well, and he's a decent defensive catcher. He had a base running goof up today, but who cares? The game was over anyway. But Jake Rogers might have a mini market, or he might be the piece that they could toss into a trade to make it go. And I know they would be short on catching to get through the season, but the season is probably going down the tank here in the next 6 weeks, so they'd be able to bring in somebody and get through the year.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think of Rogers. That we do have Dylan Dingler, who has performed pretty well in double Tigers at catcher. But I mean, we talked about this with when we were talking. Kerry Carpenter striking when the iron's hot. When a guy is performing well, there should be a lot of trade interest in Jake Rogers. He's an above-average hitter as a catcher who's also solid defensively. So I'm with you. I'd be pretty surprised if he's moved. He's 28 years old. So you still hope if the Tigers were to keep him, he has a couple years left of being a solid catcher for them and being the option for them. But I don't know. I looked at a guy like Kerry Carpenter. I'd be really shocked if he gets traded. I mean, another guy is Alex Lange. I just think with the struggles that he's had, I'd be pretty shocked if the Tigers move him as well. Jason Foley, a guy like Tyler Holton. Ooh, am I back? Like a guy like Tyler Holton, who has been really good and is still fair. I mean, Tyler Holton's a rookie, so I don't see the Tigers moving him as well.
I think it's a shame that Alex Lang really backtracked here over the last 6 weeks or whatever. He where he was through the month of May, he was probably making himself some money, number one, eventually, but also becoming someone who was tradable, who maybe there would have been a market if he could have kept it up. But now he's just looking so erratic. Even when I saw him get a save in Kansas City, boy, it was a white knuckle event. So I think I would be hard pressed to say any contender is going to look at Alex Lang and say, "Oh, hey, let's bring that roller coaster into our bullpen situation." I just don't think that's going to happen, right? So I agree with you. I don't see him getting moved. I think if I was running a contender, I'd look at Jason Foley way before Alex Lang at this time.
Yeah. And then most surprised if they don't get traded. We can start with the major leagues. Is there a player in the major leagues you'd be very surprised if they don't get traded this deadline?
Well, I'll tell you, if we go back in time again a few weeks, I thought Marcus Stroman was a dead certain to get traded. I thought he would be the kind of starting pitcher that teams would covet at the trade deadline because he's experienced. He's really competitive. He's the kind of guy you could give the ball to in the second or third game of a playoff series and say, "Hey, go win this for us, big fella." Right. But now the Cubs are rallying a little bit. So I think 6 weeks ago, me would be very surprised now that Marcus Stroman I think there's at least some chance he stays with Chicago and they try to make some kind of run. I think they're in that kind of a market where they're going to feel the need to appease the fan base some and go for it.
Yeah, the Cubs are only 6 games out of first place. So they'll be an interesting team to watch as well. I did have a topic I came up with on the fly about the team to watch at the deadline. Maybe the Cubs could be that team. For me, I went with Jeimer Candelario. I just think there's no need for Washington to hold on to him. Mm-hmm. I feel like this trade market, it's very heavy with pitchers. I think a lot of starters, a good amount of relievers as well. I think Candelario is one of the better bats on the market, especially now with Ohtani not being traded. Cody Bellinger, he might not be traded either. So I think Candelario could fit a lot of teams that need some help offensively. He can play third, he can DH, he can play first base. He's a switch hitter, a veteran. He does have a sort of a track record. I mean, he had a down year last year, but 2021 he was really solid, and now obviously picking up where he left off this year. So, like I said, we heard teams like the Angels. I think the Marlins, we don't know what they're going to do. I think they need some offense. I think the Brewers need some offense. A team like Arizona, I mean, they're very good offensively, but they've been scuffling as of late. A lot of teams I think could be interested in Candelario. So I think he would probably be my number one. I think I don't see any way of him staying on the Nationals after this trade deadline.
Major League Baseball has to be pretty happy about one thing, many things right now, but one thing in particular. Just think of all the teams you just mentioned who might be in the market to pick up players, and that is generating a lot of talk across baseball. The deadline's a popular topic every year, but I think it's really it has already gotten started with some moves. I think it's going to be a really active weekend, and it's good to see some teams that maybe were sellers in the past, or at least people who were kind of on the sidelines, might make some moves to bring in some ball players and get some help. I mean, if the Marlins actually bring in help, I mean, when is the last time that happened? The Diamondbacks, another one, as you mentioned. So I think it's going to be a real exciting week here. A lot of stuff to go. And the Tigers should have some way to get in the mix with obviously the 2 starting pitchers, but I got to think they're going to dip into that bullpen if the right deal is there.
Yeah, and I think there should. And even like you say, this is going to be an interesting deadline. I think this is going to be a seller's market. We saw Carlos Santana traded to the Brewers. The Pirates got an 18-year-old shortstop prospect, I believe, for a 37-year-old rental in Carlos Santana. I mean, that just goes to show you if this is a seller's market, because I mean, Santana was by no means having a great year. I mean, he was probably around a league average hitter. So for them to get an 18-year-old prospect who still has a lot of time to grow. I thought that was very, very interesting.
Well, they sound like they kind of like that kid a little bit. So that was yeah, I agree. I mean, Santana's definitely on the downside of his career, has been for a while. It's been a while since he's been thought of as a dangerous hitter. I gotta believe what they're hoping is that he's the kind of guy who can take some at bats down the stretch and into the playoffs, and will give you that quality at bat. He takes a lot of pitches. He draws his walks. That's the kind of guy who can help turn a lineup over if he's being patient like he has been throughout his career. But yeah, I was kind of surprised by that move too. But it just shows you if there's a market for Carlos Santana, there should be a market for some other quality players.
Yeah, and then the other trade that went down was the Dodgers acquiring Ahmed Rosario for Noah Syndergaard. I mean, the Dodgers obviously losing Trey Turner in the offseason. Rosario's picked it up as of late. I was looking at his numbers over these last couple months. He's been hitting pretty well. That was very interesting to see the Guardians picking up a struggling Noah Syndergaard with the injury to Shane Bieber. That was an interesting trade as well. I think it makes sense for the Dodgers, but I mean, for the Guardians, not really sure what they're doing, getting a rental in Noah Syndergaard.
Well, they must see something they think they can work with. Obviously, and given their track record with pitchers, well, we'll see. It's possible they could turn them around, and they only need to get 10 good starts out of them. And with let's say a 3.5 ERA, if they can do that, then maybe it's a win for them. Ahmed Rosario is an okay player, but he's still, even though he has picked it up recently, he's still a negative WAR player on the year. I think the Indians, or excuse me, there's $1 for the tip jar. The Guardians should be able to mix and match and patch that up without a problem. I kind of called that trade yesterday basically a 12-pack of Miller Lite for a 12-pack of Coors Light. And there was just really not a whole lot to get excited about either way there, but it was an interesting move. It got people thinking. As you kind of looked at the reaction, and then you look at the actual statistics, I think there's a little bit more love for Ahmed Rosario out there than really there probably should be. I think he's just kind of a placeholder type of player.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of finishing up our segment, in terms of most surprised if they don't get traded, we did have some comments, and we will answer your guys' questions at the end of the show. So if you guys want to leave some questions, we had from Tiger Town, who said the rumor of Michael Lorenzen getting traded to the Red Sox. I think the Red Sox are another really interesting team to watch this deadline. But yeah, that would be my pick, is Michael Lorenzen. I think there's just no reason to keep him on this team. He's an impending free agent, 31 years old. I mean, we're very grateful for the season that he's had here. Like I said, he's had a career year. But I think Lorenzen makes sense for a lot of teams as a back-end starter, but also as a long reliever out of the bullpen too. So seeing that comment from Tiger Town about the Red Sox, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but they could definitely be an option for Michael Lorenzen. But in terms of most surprised if they don't get traded, Lorenzen would be my pick. And then in terms of like a player, I think the Tigers should trade. I think Jose Cisnero, I think they should look to trade him. He's getting up there in age, has kind of tailed off over these last couple months, has struggled a little bit, but I still think there's some value in his arm. So he's a guy I think you should package together with a Michael Lorenzen or an Erod. So for me, it would be most surprised if Lorenzen doesn't get traded, and then Cisnero would be my guy. I think the Tigers should really look to trade this deadline.
It's interesting to hear that there's a rumor to the Red Sox for Lorenzen, only because, the Red Sox, even though they're above 500 for a while, they were in last place, but they have been playing better. I'm sure that's, again, another market where they want to be in go-for-it mode. And to be honest, with their revenue and everything else, they should be going for it. And there's no reason for them to, if they're have an above 500 competitive ball club, not to make some kind of run at things. So yeah, if they're snooping around for Lorenzen, that's probably a deal that won't cost a ton in terms of prospects. Something they can see as a short-term boost and doesn't hurt them long-term in their talent base. So yeah, we'll have to see where that one goes. For me, the one who, if they doesn't get traded, it's kind of an easy answer, but it should be Rodriguez. No. The only thing I can see is if Detroit makes some kind of deal with him where they add some money to each year on his remaining deal and add a year at the end. If that happens, maybe he would consider opting in early and making that an extension and keeping him in Detroit. I really don't see the need for the Tigers to do that. However, his deal is very affordable. If he wants to opt in at the end of the year, great. Wherever he goes, I think any team would take that as an affordable contract. But I don't think he's, again, as good as he's pitched this year, I don't know if he's good enough to care long term if he stays or not. I think if you find a price, if you set a price here at the deadline, you find the guys you want, you don't even worry about opting in, opting out, extending him, all the other crap. You just make the move, you live with it, and you move forward.
Yeah. But I did come up with some topics on the fly. We were talking about like teams to watch, and we're talking about how interesting this deadline will be. I think there's so many interesting teams. Like I'm looking at like every single division. There's multiple teams where you could be really intrigued what they do. Like the Cardinals, what are they gonna do? Milwaukee, I think they need to make some moves. They already have made a move. The Cubs, who knows with them? The Diamondbacks, I think they need to make a move. It'll be really interesting to see. But the one team that I think is going to be the team to watch has to be the Baltimore Orioles, just because of the talent that they already have, the position that they're in, the depth in their farm system. I think for me, they have to have a big trade deadline. So to me, they would be my team to watch.
And that's where I really hope in the end, Eduardo Rodriguez goes to Baltimore or perhaps the Diamondbacks, but really Baltimore, because when you look at the top 10 prospects remaining in their system, and that's not even including some of the dudes that are already in the big leagues who are still probably rookies, maybe even still have technically prospect status because they haven't reached some of the thresholds like Baseball America uses to make someone a prospect or not. When you look at the depth of that system, the Joey Ortizes of the world and players like Connor Norby and others, there are some quality bats sitting there in the Baltimore system who may or may not have much of a chance to play over the next few years because of players that are ahead of them. So if Scott Harris can swoop in there, offer up, Rodriguez and maybe a bullpen arm as well, I got to believe they can walk away with a player who has a very good opportunity to be in Detroit's starting lineup in the next 2 years.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of other teams, like I think the Astros, they're probably going to make a move. Boston, I think they're going to make a move, whether it's sellers or buyers. We don't really know. I mean, they've already sold Kike Hernandez. So that'll be really interesting to see. It should be a really fun trade deadline. Hopefully we have a lot of stuff to talk about and react to on Monday's show. But did you have something?
Well, I think we've pretty much talked out the deadline. I think it's going to be fun. I wanted to go back to today in Detroit. I was watching Matt Manning. He came out really firing bullets. He was throwing 97 in the first inning. He looked great. Threw a couple of nice breaking balls as well. Looked like he might, keep the Angels down. And then he got lit up for a few home runs, including 2 to Shohei Ohtani. And again, there's no embarrassment in the world to giving up a home run to Shohei Ohtani. He is possibly the best hitter in baseball. If not the best hitter, he's one of the 5 best hitters in baseball. He's certainly one of the best power hitters in baseball. But when you read some of Manning's quotes after the game, it almost read like he got a little bit too lost in the moment. He got, the bright lights of pitching to Shohei Ohtani got to him, and he challenged him a bit. He said, it is what it is. I went after him with my best. And you look at those 2 fastballs that that Ohtani deposited into the seats. They were both pretty lousy pitches. They really were. They were right down the gut, saying, "Hey, hit me hard," and Ohtani obliged. So I think that hopefully either Manning learned a lesson or someone on the coaching staff will impart a lesson upon him that you can't get too excited about facing some of these guys. You still have to pitch to them. You don't have to throw to your best to them. You don't have to challenge them necessarily. Now, he struck out Ohtani once, and that was great the first time, but he might have got a little full of himself, and he came after him with some pitches that were just dead ducks. Manning has some ability, but he's not the guy who's going to overpower Shohei Ohtani 3 times in one night.
Yeah, and that's interesting you brought that up because we did have some comments. I mean, talking about trading Matt Manning, I don't think that's on the table at all. I mean, he's 25 years old. He has 190 innings pitched in his career, so essentially a full season. I did have a tough start today, but he has been pretty solid since he's come back.
Well, I think with the trade rumors about him, someone mentioned him earlier in the week. I forget where, but it doesn't matter. I think the problem there is I think he's talented. I really do. And I'm not, just because he gave up 7 runs and some home runs to Shohei Ohtani, I'm not down on him by any stretch. I just think he had a kind of a bad afternoon. But when it comes to buyers, contenders looking to add to their rotation for the playoffs, they tend to go for experienced guys. And again, I talked about this the other night. Matt Manning never pitched a full season in the big leagues, has a lot of unproven aspects to his game. I just can't see a team making a move to get him. I'd be really surprised making a move to get him and saying, hey, this is the guy who's going to bolster us for the stretch drive and into the playoffs. I don't see that. I think a Matt Manning trade, if the Tigers look at their whole roster and their organization and want to make some changes in the offseason, and you package a Matt Manning to bring in some other pieces, that makes more sense. But for a trade deadline move, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, and then I did also see a comment, and this is a topic we haven't really talked about the Tigers trading a prospect. And Parker Meadows was a name that I thought about because we've talked about wanting to see the Tigers get creative, wanting them to be a third team and a big deal. What if the Tigers do a prospect for prospect trade, or maybe there's a young player? I remember we talked about Jonathan India. There's a young player that they identify that can help them right now. So maybe they trade a prospect like a Parker Meadows because, I mean, in terms of the outfield, they have a lot of left-handed bats in the system. Obviously, Max Clark, Colt Keith, Jace Young. You have Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter at the major league level. I'm not saying Parker Meadows is necessarily expandable, but I do think it's trading from a place of strength. So he's a guy, I think, if there's a prospect that the Tigers could look to move, I think that would be very interesting. But that was just an interesting kind of topic and concept because we haven't really talked about the Tigers maybe doing a prospect for prospect trade or maybe trading him for a young player who's has years of control that, Scott Harris identifies could be a piece to this team for the next couple of years.
Well, you'd have to look at a team that's probably that feels they're on the way up, right? And if Jonathan India is someone that the Reds feel they don't have a spot for because of who they've brought in, would they want a player? Probably they'd want a reliever, let's say, to help them now to get them, into the playoffs potentially, and then perhaps could have to put in a prospect to even things out a little bit. If it was, let's say, they wanted Cisnero, okay. But Cisnero for India is probably not a very equal trade. Would Detroit have to put in a prospect to make it work? That's possible. I mean, who knows? I would hope the Tigers are in a new regime creative now and are willing to do things a little out of the ordinary, stuff that Alex Avila wasn't really looking to always do.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have some depth in the infield. They obviously drafted Kevin McDonald. They drafted the second baseman with the 45 overall pick. Is it Max Anderson?
Yeah, got a good start. Had a good start for his career the other day.
He did. You have Winsel Perez, who's now made his way up to AAA as well. Jace Jung just got called up. So, I mean, maybe like a guy like Winsel Perez could be tradable as well. But I think that's really interesting because if Scott Harris identifies a prospect or a young player that he really likes and really think can help this team, maybe throwing in a prospect, attaching it, like you said, to a Cisnero or Chasen Shreve or Michael Lorenzen, I think it'd be really, really interesting. And like I said, I think getting creative is not something we've seen the Tigers do, and I think it's not a bad thing, especially with them continuing to hopefully build depth in their farm system.
Yep, absolutely. So, the other thing today was I'm wondering if today is the official day of the funeral of the playoff race for the Tigers. They are now 11 games under 500. They have lost more ground to the Twins today. At some point, it's fun to fantasize about them making this run toward a division title in a very winnable division where you may not even have to win 81 games to win it. But I think scoring 4 runs in 2 games today and a couple of runs at the end were pretty much at the end of a blowout when pitchers are probably just throwing strikes just to try to get the thing over with. It just showed that the offense of this team has never been of a quality where hopes of winning a division was realistic. And they again showed so much a lack of power all up and down the lineup in so many different spots. They just never get that 2-run homer out of nowhere very often. So I would think, with the trade deadline here, a couple guys probably getting shipped out, the fact that they got swept by the Angels, some of the playoff talk probably will pipe down around the Twitter world.
Yeah, and I think it should. I mean, I don't know if I'd expect this team to fall off a cliff and be 15, 20 games under 500. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you expect a team like the Twins to pick it up. I think Carlos Correa has been a little bit better. Maybe they make a move. I mean, they already have made a move trading Jorge Lopez for Dylan Floro. The Guardians, they're at 500. We saw them make a run. They could continue to play better down the stretch. So yeah, I think that the terms of winning the division, I think that talk should be over. I mean, they're 11 games under 500. They're going to sell at the deadline. They've had a couple players, play over their head, and like Zach McKinstry, I think is kind of been figured out a little bit in terms of at the plate. Kerry Carpenter has struggled a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he's going to fall off a cliff or anything, but I think they're becoming the team we thought they were going to be, which is around a 70-win team. And they have shown a lot of fight this year. So it'll be interesting to see. But
when I say that, we can plan the funeral for the playoff hopes. That doesn't mean it hasn't been an enjoyable season. There have been some good takeaways. Some of the pitching performances have been very solid and have kept the club in it. Riley Green, when he hasn't been hurt, has been sensational to watch. So we've seen Spencer Torkelson take at least some steps forward. Kerry Carpenter take some steps forward. Matt Vierling get out to a slow start, but now is at least a semi-useful player. Jake Rogers, better than I thought he would be and has made some swing changes I think that are helping. So it's been a fun year, and we're going to watch it out to the end because we're Tiger fans and that's what we do. But I think that the offense has really just shown that they've had very little improvement from last year as a whole. And that it has to be a point of emphasis with Scott Harris that his offseason, if he has any intent to make a run next year at a division that should still be fairly winnable for any team that's really trying, to find some depth offensively for this lineup where they can count on scoring more than 3 runs on a nightly basis.
Yeah, and I mean, Tiger Town in the chat has had some great questions and some great comments. I mean, asking the question of improvement from this year to last year record-wise. I don't know if the record – I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything, but I think you're looking for more – you're looking deeper than just the record. You're looking for improvement for players. I think just morale, I think, seems a lot better for the Tigers. I think just having this overall of the front office. I mean, one thing we haven't even brought up was the draft. The Tigers spent more money than any other team in the draft. I think that is a really positive development and showing that the Tigers know they need to build through the draft and need to build a core and a foundation to where they can build a sustainable winner. So I think that's a really positive thing as well. But yeah, like you said, naming off all the players like the Torkelsons, Greens, and Kerry Carpenters, some of the relievers like Foley and Lang and Tyler Holton, like seeing the development of those guys is really what matters. Because at the end of the day, even if the Tigers were able to sneak into the playoffs, we're looking long-term. We're looking for them to compete for a World Series. And I think there's pieces in place right now, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done for this team to truly be looked at as a contender for a World Series.
So I'm not exactly sure what Tiger Town was asking in terms of the record from one year to the next. Is he saying that it's good to be a little bit better each year?
He said the real question we should be asking ourselves as Tigers fans is, did we make improvement from last year to this year record-wise?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully they will. I mean, that's obviously one way to track it. But also, let's remember there are plenty of instances in baseball history in the last few decades where a team has gone from worst to first, too, or made significant strides. I wonder if we really did an in-depth study of playoff teams, find out how many teams went, from 60 wins to 75 wins to 88 wins, then all of a sudden winning the title, over a 4-year progression, a little bit better at a time. Or did they keep building their organization, strike the right chord in free agency, and go from 67 wins to 95 wins, and all of a sudden, boom, they're a contender. I would bet we'd find instances of both. So I don't get too lost in the wins and losses because, you might have injuries one year versus peak performance of a bad roster another year, and both teams might end up with 66 wins. Which one is better? It's hard to say.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about too is just like in terms of having a star, like a bona fide all-star level hitter. I think we can now pretty confidently say we have that in Riley Green. Only 258 at bats this year, but I mean, he's been really good, and he did have a bit of a rough stretch towards the start of the season. But to see him come back and hit the way that he has, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The Tigers haven't really had a true all-star level hitter since like Miguel Cabrera in 2016. He was the last. I mean, if you're counting Justin Upton in 2017, but he was traded at the deadline. I mean, Miggy in 2022, I wouldn't really count that. Like, to me, it looks like the Tigers finally have like a star level player in the middle of their lineup, which we haven't had in a very long time. And even some of the worst teams in baseball, they'll have that guy that they can look at and rally around and kind of be the face of the team. I think we're starting to see that with Riley Green now, and I think that's really, really exciting to see with him being so young and having the success that he has. I mean, like, who was that for us these last couple of years? Was it Nick Castellanos? I mean, he was really the best hitter we had for a while. I mean, Candelario over the last couple of years, at least in 2021, he was probably our best hitter. So to have a guy like Riley Green, who we can say is hitting like an all-star, has an all-star level ceiling, is very, very exciting to see. And it's been a long time coming for the Tigers.
I'm going to be the guy who taps the brakes just slightly. I think what we have seen has been very fun and very impressive. I've been very impressed with what he does with 2 strikes. He has the ability. There's no question. And he has the possibilities of being the star you're talking about. He has the possibilities of being, a guy who gets MVP votes, right? And that's what they're hoping for. He still needs to show a little more power, a little more consistent power. And he just needs to do it for a longer period of time. And obviously he needs to stay healthy, which he hasn't done, but he just needs to show this over a longer stretch of time. You're saying he's at 258 at bats this year, plus whatever he had last year. So we're still probably under 700 career at bats, right? I don't know what he had last year.
So he has 634 for his career. So
okay, so there you go.
That was a good guess.
Yeah, not bad. So, if he can continue on this year, stay healthy through next spring training and come out doing the same thing, I think they have something to build around. Now, with that being said, they still need a lot more, because the team they played today has had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani on it for the last few years, and they have the same amount of playoff wins as Rogelio's softball team. Okay, so that's just a fact. So you need more than just that, one guy. So what is the move going to be? Is it just waiting for Spencer Torkelson to take the next step? Is it hopeful that Colt Keith arrives and is the real deal? Or are they going to go and make some trades to bring in some legitimate hitters? Or are they going to make a splash in free agency? And again, we talked about the free agents market doesn't look great this year, but there's always a couple guys who can hit. somewhere if you find the right ones. So it's going to be interesting to see, how do they build around Riley Green, even if he does remain on the star track we hope he's on.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was thinking of. Like, I feel like all these teams, once in a while, they'll run into a star. Like, you look at Mike Trout, was a guy that kind of developed with the Angels, and I think Mike Trout, regardless of what team he was drafted to, Mike Trout was going to be Mike Trout. I don't think it was like the Angels had this, great development for him, and like he was only going to be good there. Like, some players are just going to be great no matter where they get drafted to and where they play. And obviously, situations help, like the Astros helping Justin Verlander to continue to have, for him to reach levels I don't think we ever thought we'd see him reach at his age. But you hope for the Tigers in the future, like JD Martinez, for example, a guy that just came out of nowhere and became an all-star. You hope there's a move like that down the line, whether it's the Tigers trading for an undervalued player in another organization that can blossom here. Maybe it's an international signing or a draft pick, but you really hope, like Elly De La Cruz was like for the Reds. I remember seeing a tweet from a Tigers fan who said, "Why don't the Tigers ever have an Elly De La Cruz?" You're hoping that with this new front office, they can find somebody, whether it's through the draft, whether it's through free agency, to find a guy to put next to Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson to really put this team over the top. Because I don't know necessarily if that guy is in the farm system. Maybe Max Clark can be that, but I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But I do think there are some good pieces in place, but I still think this team is a couple years away from being what we truly want it to be.
Well, I'll give you my 3-game scouting assessment of Colt Keith next week. So I'm going to be seeing he's coming to town here in Des Moines with the Mud Hens. So I'll pronounce my judgment on him after seeing the grand total of maybe about 12 at bats, assuming he plays in all 3 games I'll be at. So, but he's just a guy. He's flourished at the AA level. He is now to AAA. I know he had a couple slow weeks there, but he's doing fine. Is he the kind of guy who's going to come in next year and make an impact? I'm really excited to see it. He's done everything you hope a hitter will do at the minor league level. He's a left-handed batter who can hit left-handers. The power has shown up now. He doesn't strike out an exorbitant amount of times. He draws a few walks. That's the guy. Again, I don't think they can rely just on the minors, but that is a guy in their minor league system who they can legitimately say, hey, we have him. We're probably going to have him at some point next summer. And off we go.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, if he can, reach the same levels as a Torkelson or a Green, you add him to this young core, that could be really, really exciting to see.
I'm excited to see him next week. I really am. And it looks like, barring a move this weekend, which if they pull the rug out from under me, you better not, Scott Harris, are you listening? If I'm hopeful Austin Meadows is here, Parker Meadows. Austin Meadows does not need to be in Des Moines. He does not have to come. But Parker Meadows, I want to have to be here. And Justin Henry Malloy and Wenzel Perez. I'm interested to see all 4 of those guys again. I saw Malloy and Meadows when they were here in the spring for their first time the Mud Hens came through. I'm interested to see them now again toward the end of the season and see what kind of maturation, if anything has changed over these last 2 or 3 months since I saw them last. And of course, I want to see Colt Keith. I'm very, very excited to watch him 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they do get some time in Detroit this year. I think the trade deadline will tell a lot about that. But I mean, Justin Henry Malloy is a guy we've talked about seemingly all season about getting called up. Colt Keith, I think, needs more time in AAA before we're really going to know. But it'll be interesting to see.
I don't know if any of those guys are on the 40-man roster. I think maybe Meadows. Obviously, yeah. Colt Keith isn't, and I'm sure there are some, reasons for service time and everything else to keep them out of Detroit this year if possible. So that's fine, and they have to do what they have to do. But it would be fun to see Meadows and Malloy in Detroit this year if circumstances warrant.
Yeah, I can double check for you in a second, but the only other topic I really had, unless there's anything else you want to go over, was just favorite trades over these years? Was there any like trade deadline deals that you kind of look back on fondly that you
Yeah,
know?
several, but the one that really was like lightning in a bottle was the Doug Fister trade.
Oh yeah.
When Doug Fister came from Seattle, boy, very few Tiger fans had really heard of him. He had just pitched a nice game against the Tigers in Detroit for the Mariners a couple of weeks before the deadline, I believe. And I don't know how much that influenced Dave Dombrowski. But sure enough, then, as the deadline approached, boom, they made the move. They sent, I believe, 3 prospects, Chase Ruffin, whatever his name was. He was Bruce Ruffin's son. They sent a third base prospect who people sort of liked. And then Charlie Furbush, I believe, went over in that trade. And they didn't give up a lot, but you also didn't expect they were getting a lot because, again, nobody really knew much about Doug Fister. And what did he do? I mean, he came in and immediately kicked some ass. I mean, he was amazing down the stretch for a team that won the division, really propelled them to a division title. So that was a fantastic move. And I'll give you one that disappointed people, but I still will argue to this day was the right move. In 2009, the team was contending, but they needed help. They were down to 2 starting pitchers who were really viable, Verlander and Porcello. And they went out and got Jared Washburn from also the Mariners. And people were excited. And I believe he was leading the American League in ERA, or he was close. They had to have pitching. A lot of fans wanted them to get a hitter, but they needed a pitcher. I was convinced. And they went and got Washburn. And what happened is he hurt his knee almost immediately. I think he had one halfway decent start, and then he was garbage the rest of the year. It was horrible luck, but I will defend that trade forever, that it was the right move in the moment. They needed pitching very badly, and it showed down the stretch when Porcello and Verlander were pitching okay, but then they were giving starts to guys like Eddie Bonine and a bunch of other guys you've never heard of. So trying to limp their way into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, so we had a question. So the reliever that was traded with Doug Fister was David Pauly. I do have some memory of him.
He came to Detroit with him. Yeah.
Yes. So we traded Casper Wells. So I do remember Casper Wells. He was a right-handed hitter who had a little bit of power.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that Doug Fister trade. Doug Fister is one of my favorite Tigers players. I mean, what he did for them, I believe he had I don't know how I know this, but he had a 1.79 ERA in that 2011 season, and then obviously 2012 and 2013. Was really disappointed to see him traded in 2014. I thought he complemented like Verlander and Scherzer really well because you had the hard throwers and Scherzer and Verlander. Then you had Fister, who was kind of more of like a precise guy. I mean, he was really, really fun to watch and very, very underrated.
And very tall.
Yeah, and very tall as well.
I'll give you my 30-second story on him. I was having coffee in Minneapolis with Tom Gage, who used to write my name drop brag, right? With Tom Gage, used to write for the Detroit News. Wonderful man, salt of the earth person, love him. But anyway, we're sitting there having coffee in a Starbucks in the Tigers Hotel, and in walks Doug Fister the day after he had struck out 9 in a row against the Royals in Detroit. They made the overnight trip to Minnesota, and I was in town to watch from here in Iowa. So Tom Gage introduced me to Doug Fister. I'm 6'6", as I've told you in the past. I am, the tallest person in probably 95% of rooms I walk into. I legitimately looked up at Doug Fister. They listed him at 6'8". It wouldn't shock me if he was actually 6'9". That dude was tall. So that was a legit listing for him.
Yeah, I mean, this is becoming the Doug Fister appreciation show, but Doug Fister, 3 years with the Tigers, 3.29 ERA in 440 innings pitched. So, I mean, he was essential. I mean, he was almost a Cy Young level pitcher. I mean, that was a fantastic trade. I mean,
he was a quality arm, no doubt about it.
In the Dave Dombrowski era, I mean, I started watching in 2010, but I mean, you had the Johnny Peralta trade that worked out really well. He made multiple All-Stars. all-star teams with the Tigers. I don't even know what the Tigers gave up to get him, but
they gave up a relief pitcher, a lefty named Giovanni Soto.
Giovanni Soto.
And he, not the Giovanni Soto who caught for the Cubs,
yeah.
a different Giovanni Soto, spelled it differently. He was actually a guy who had a decent year for the Tigers, and I was like a little surprised they gave him up. And he might have had a cup of coffee with the Cleveland at the time, but never amounted to much. It was a great trade. I mean, Johnny Peralta did the job.
Yes, and then you had the Anibal Sanchez and Omar Infante trade, which I know the Tigers gave up Jacob Turner. I mean, Sanchez, another guy. I mean, it didn't really work out towards the end of his Tigers tenure, unfortunately, when he got the extension, but won the ERA title in 2013, was really good in 2012 and 2014. And Infante was a very good second baseman on a team that made it to the World Series. Yeah, I mean, you obviously have a lot of Al Avila trades that probably didn't work out too well. You did have the 2015 deadline with the David Price and Yoenis Cespedes deal. I think that worked out fairly well for the Tigers, getting Michael Fulmer, who won Rookie of the Year, Matt Boyd, who this was a fun fact. I was looking this up because in my free time, I just look at baseball stats because I guess I'm a nerd like that. But Matthew Boyd actually has the 22nd most strikeouts in Detroit Tigers history. Was very surprised to find that out, but he did have 238 strikeouts in 2019. Yeah. So Matt Boyd, 22nd in Detroit Tigers history in strikeouts.
First in our hearts.
Yes, but you got him. You got Daniel Norris. You also got, I believe, another left-handed pitcher, Jario Lambert, I think it was how you pronounced it, for David Price. So I don't think those trades weren't necessarily bad.
Jairo Lambert.
Okay.
Labort. That's what it was. Jairo Labort.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the Al Avila era, a lot of it's a blur. I mean, the Castellanos trade, obviously,
the thing about it, when you have so many losses piling up year after year after year, so many of the losses just become so non-memorable. I mean, that's the thing from the 2013 Tigers or the 2012 Tigers. I mean, those teams, those had even the 2009 Tigers who lost in game 163 because they were good and competitive. They had a lot of hard losses that just ripped your guts out as a fan, right? I mean, those things, you remember that stuff. Whereas these teams that we've had the last few years, loss number 79 wasn't a whole hell of a lot different than loss number 94, so the years just kind of run together when they're losing this badly.
Yeah, I mean, Tiger Town said the JD Martinez trade, but we were trying to stay on like good trades. So
yes, I know I brought up a bad trade earlier, but yes, good trades. Let's dwell on the positive.
Yes, there was some positives once upon a time, but I do think this trade line will be a positive. I think it'll be very fun, very exciting. We might have an emergency pod hopefully this weekend, but again, the trade deadline show on Monday will be really, really fun as well.
What other questions did we have?
We were kind of answering them as we go. I mean, there's a question about the Rangers looking for pitchers. Could they be a destination for Erod or Lorenzen? I mean, they did lose DeGrom, but I feel like Eovaldi's been good. You have Andrew Heaney. Dan Dunning's been really solid as well. They still have John Gray, Martin Perez. I mean, those are 5 guys I named it right there. So I don't know if the Rangers would be a potential fit.
Well, here's the thing. I think almost every club who's contending will say in some way, shape, or form they need to bolster their depth pitching wise. So I think pretty much any team that is in buy mode, you can construct some kind of argument why Eduardo Rodriguez or Lorenzen or a Foley or somebody like that could help them. So in some sense, of course, some of them probably don't have a good scouting report on Eduardo Rodriguez, and they're going to be a no. But for the most part, from what we know as fans, as from observers, pretty much every contender has some way to make an argument that they're a fit for what the Tigers have to sell, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, those were the only real questions. I mean, we had comment Rangers, Rays, Reds, Phillies, and Diamondbacks have all shown interest in Erod. I mean, I think there's a lot of teams that have shown interest in him. I mean, I think for me, my team would be the Orioles or the Diamondbacks. But
it should be the environment where Scott Harris if he has the trading acumen and the ability to juggle a whole bunch of different offers at once, or at least semi offers from team, soft offers, or he should be able to drum up some kind of competition for the players he has to sell and get a pretty good price and set a decent price, a reasonable price, but still a decent price for these guys, and be able to get players he wants. I really believe that he has a nice opportunity that in past years maybe Al Avila did not have.
Yeah, but I mean, those are all only real questions we had. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up or talk about, Yper?
Well, we got the Miami Marlins this weekend.
We do.
They're a team that's making a little bit of a surprise run. They have some, pretty nice pitching. It'll be real interesting. Luckily for the Tigers, Yuri Perez is not on the team now. They're resting him a bit in the minors, trying to stretch his innings out over the season. He'll probably be back in August. It'll be interesting to see if the Tigers can rebound from this lackluster day and show a little bit more energy tomorrow and take it to the Marlins. The Tigers have been at least a competitive road team, so I don't know why they couldn't, perk up tomorrow and get a win and see if they can win this series in Miami.
Yes, so they have 3 against the Marlins, I believe, and then they have the Pirates, and then to start August, the Rays, and then the Twins. So
I know they have 7 with the Rays left this year, and I think 7 with the Yankees, right? So I mean, they do have some, there's going to be some rough spots to the schedule, which is why we always kind of thought the idea of making a run at division probably didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was still fun to talk about and even dream about. But there are definitely some rough spots in the schedule coming up here where they're going to have to play some good baseball if they're going to want to be competitive.
Yeah, I see the Yankees at the end of the month. You have the Astros,
Yeah,
Cubs, Red Indians. I mean, yeah, it looks like the Pirates are probably going to be the Tigers' weakest opponent for the next month. It's looking like, so it'll be a really interesting month of August. We hope we can see some competitive baseball and they can continue to fight and give us. I'm not saying they're going to get back in the playoff race, but
fight the good fight.
Yeah,
be
fight
scrappy.
the good fight.
We want to do scrappy.
Yeah. Well, Jacob did leave a comment too about Joey Wentz. He was a guy I was looking at. I think Joey Wentz is a guy we could potentially see get called up if I wouldn't say when the Tigers do trade some of these starters, because you're thinking about what the rotation could look like with Manning, Skubal. You've got Reese Olson, Faedo, and then maybe Joey Wentz. I mean, he's been decent. I think his ERA was around 4 when I checked a couple days ago in AAA. So I think he's a guy that could potentially be called up as well. That could be. Listen,
they have what, 59 games to go right now? I think they played 103 games. So they got 59 to go. So that's almost 12 times through the rotation. With Skubal, his workload might be reduced a little bit as they go. And I don't know how much they can count on Faedo. They're going to have to get starts from some people, and they probably can't do a bullpen start more than once or twice a week. So, yeah, I would say Joey Wentz, if he shows any bit of life in Toledo, they'll probably bring him back for at least a handful of starts this year. We could see that.
Yeah, and then we did have a couple comments about Spencer Turnbull. I'll be honest, I mean, Raj, our guy who's been in the locker room, he would probably know more about that. I haven't heard anything on Spencer Turnbull. Have you heard anything?
I know he's in West Michigan, right? He was gonna throw down there. I did not hear how it went, if he already did it. There's just so much negativity and people throwing their hands up every time his name comes up. You just wonder if they have washed their hands of him or are going to. But again, at the same time, if this team is, 10 to 15 games under 500 and it's in September and he says he's healthy and he wants to go out there, well, why wouldn't you throw him out there for a couple starts just to get you to the end of the season. And I'm sure he's probably not in their plans moving forward. At least that's how it sounds like from everything we hear.
Yeah, so he threw 2 scoreless innings for the Whitecaps. I mean, maybe he's a guy we can see. I don't know if the relationship is damaged. I know there's been a lot of negativity toward him. I mean, the Tigers need arms, and I think at the end of the day, Spencer Turnbull has had success at the major league level. He's thrown a no-hitter. I think a lot of people can agree that there's something with him. So you hope things can, he can figure it out. He can pitch well for the Tigers and maybe be a piece they can move this offseason. But that'll be remain. We'll see what happens there. But yes, he did make a rehab start from what I'm reading.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Uper?
No, I don't think so. It was fun watching Shohei Ohtani. It wasn't as fun watching the Tigers, but that's okay. The next week is going to be something we've been looking forward to for a while because we want to judge Scott Harris. Now, it doesn't mean if he's not able to pull off the deal of the century, that doesn't make him a bad front office person. Okay, because he's going to be judged over a course of several seasons. But if he can really pull the trigger on some moves that get positive reviews from me, most importantly, right? that will be a very positive sign. So I'm very excited to see what he's able to conjure up with what he has to offer, because he has some pieces. They're not A+ pieces, but he has some pieces that he can put on the market and should be valuable to some folks.
Yeah. Like I said, really fun, exciting week. It's been a really fun and exciting month. But the Tigers getting healthy with the draft, I think a lot of people view that as a success. And now with the trade deadline, just want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat, who's listened to the podcast, who's watched the videos on YouTube. There are plenty of clips on the YouTube channel if you guys want to go check them out. We did have Steve, who this was his first time watching the show tonight. So thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Steve.
We'll be here.
I'm always stunned anybody cares what I have to say. So, man, for you folks who are out there tonight, I love you, and we all appreciate it, because we do this for fun, and it's a great time, and the fact that other folks are out there enjoying it is just really cool.
Yeah, we love our Tigers. We love talking Tigers, and yes, it's like I said, it's been a great month in terms of you guys tuning into the podcast. The numbers in terms of social media viewership have all been through the roof. So thank you guys, everyone who's joined in and supported us. And a lot of great stuff to come. So from myself, Uper, Raj, and Chris, who are having a good old time down in Erie.
Tearing it up in Erie.
Yeah. We will see you guys on Monday for what will be a very, very exciting show.
All right.
And have a good weekend, everybody.